everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Post Post-Race Debrief. I know we've been up for a very long time. I feel like a very long time because it's almost been a month. We've had three back-to-back races, and those three races have basically brought us to the midpoint of this season. And my goodness, what were those three races? Because Naraka and I were almost short definitively going into this triple header with the notion that, okay, by the end of it, we're going to have a per championship lead, or we'll at least get to see who's going to take this all the way through. Right? And although that name hasn't changed much, we've seen that they've been given one for their money. I'm talking about Verstappen and Red Bull Racing, and both in the drivers and the constructors championship, two teams that have all of a sudden closed in, and one of those teams who's made most covered the most gap in front wasn't McLaren, it was Mercedes. That was probably the team that I did not have my money on. Nahar, I know we discussed quite a bit about this, and we had a lot of discussion about how McLaren were the ones who really had the game in race before triple header, and that they would continue that momentum. But right now, I'm sitting on the other side of the table thinking we might have underestimated what Mercedes could do. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you were there in Silverstone. We had one of the best races there. What was your experience? Let's start with that, and then finally, what on earth happened these races?
Well, Silverstone's always Silverstone, and I'm doing it after 2018. It's my first Silverstone Grand Prix after the pandemic, and then you have 500,000 Brits coming to watch it. So yes, it's always a surreal experience. It's one of the atmosphere there is buzzing, and you obviously had the Euro Cup where you in Britain made it to the semi-finals. So that was really nice, where we all watched it together. After qualifying. But yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it's one of those Grand Prix where all the teams have their bases around, so everybody's really excited for it, like a home Grand Prix. And then obviously you had a British driver win it, and Lewis of all people, who was not had a win for 945 days. That's the longest streak ever. But then he's also made another record, which is he's also won the maximum number of races at a single circuit, which is 9 wins at one particular circuit. And that was a very emotional scene. I don't think he expected himself to be emotional about it. I don't think we expected him to be crying behind the helmet. But it was pretty special. And I think whether you like Hamilton or not, everybody was happy for him, including people like Helmut, who was praising him for his tire management. Someone like Christian, who gave the Nicky Lauda version of saying, today we have our hats off for him. We take our hats off for him, kind of a thing. So there was nobody who came back without a negative feedback. Everyone was pretty happy. And we've had 6 different race winners in 12 races. So we have quite the season here. I know it's the halfway mark. The optics on paper don't look so, but we have quite the season here. I mean, the last time we had 8 different race winners was in 2012. And since we haven't had those many multiple race winners, but we are seeing it come alive here. And there's still Oscar Piastri, who might just get a win. For all you know, one of the midfielders like a Hülkenberg or someone just targets a podium, because I mean, look at Haas. Look at Mercedes. They've made steps. They have made the right steps ahead, and you can see them stepping up their game. And these cars are converging. The grid is converging. So it's getting pretty interesting here on.
I love it. And in fact, you brought up a good point, which is that we've had 6 different winners in the past 12 races. Now, that's a metric that we probably didn't have in our minds when we started out this year, because Red Bull started out so strong.
Yeah.
But I am just curious to know if this is. We've discussed this before, and it's that Red Bull slowly catching up to the fact. I mean, coming to terms with the fact that people are catching up, and that competition is imminent, even
Yeah.
though they're still as dominant as they probably were before. But now, looking forward to the rest of the season, we've done so far so well. Now, is this more of a two-bull fight, which is that it's not between the two bulls, but then it's between Red Bull Racing and probably another team now? It could be
Yes.
Mercedes, it could be McLaren, but now does the funnel start closing in?
Yes. Now, here's the thing where Red Bull have always been prepared for the cars converging, and they've been saying it themselves that their performance and their development of the car so somewhere has plateaued. Everything has there's only so much they can develop their car, and then it peaks and then it plateaus, and you can't keep bringing in that performance. It's getting harder and harder for them to bring performance to that car in the form of upgrades or whatever. And you have Max almost pulling out extra tens and using every bit of what he can to keep that car in P1 or P2 tops. So, or to keep it in the top three and maintain his lead. Now, here's the part where McLaren have helped them. Canada was a McLaren win. Red Bull jumped them in the pits and strategy. That's a zone where Red Bull is the most well oiled machine. And that is where in 2021, 2020, you'd see Red Bull taking these wins when you'd least expect it. So, strategy is something that's one of Red Bull's strongest, you know what, that's one of their strong points. And McLaren, when you come into this season, you've got to be prepared for something like a Red Bull. They've obviously not expected it to be that close, but given that they are coming here to challenge a Red Bull, they need to know that this is one of their strong points, and that's the area they can't afford flaws in. You've seen a 4.7 second pit stop for Lando Norris in England. You've seen a similar slow pit stop in Austria. Austria was obviously the clash, but Lando lost out on the pit stop, or he would have been ahead of Max. Then you obviously had oh, I think it was the other way around. That Red Bull lost, rarely makes a mistake, and Red Bull made a mistake when Max came out behind Lando, if I'm not wrong. Yes, in Austria, Max lost his lead because of his slow pit stop. Yes, so that's where Red Bull faltered. But that's when McLaren did not need to make that mistake, that clash on track. So that's another win gone. Then you have, I think, Barcelona, where McLaren, it was a McLaren track. Spain was a McLaren track. So you've had Canada, Spain, Austria, and Silverstone.
100%. Yeah.
You've had Russell come out on top last time because of these two clashing. You've had now you have a Hamilton, and in the last four races, Mercedes have been biting at the feet of McLaren because all these points they've thrown away. Um, Mercedes have been able to capitalize on. Russell was obviously a lot of luck because it's because Max and him crashed out and he was in a good position that he was able to then come alive later in the race. But when you look at Hamilton, Hamilton really managed his soft tires really well. And that's got even a praise by, say, someone like Marco, that this is where experience counts. He nursed those soft tires. With Lando, you saw those tires giving away. Max was on a hard tire, and that strategy just made it work for him to go take P2. But that hasn't been a points gap. Like there was 80 points, 81 points between Max and Lando, and about 83 points in between the two teams. Now that's reduced in the driver's title. It's 70 something, if I'm not wrong. You might have it in front of you. It's 71 or
Right.
something.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that's
You're right. Yeah.
and then you have 12 more races on the
Yeah.
calendar, and there are going to be tracks like, say, they're going to be tracks with the rougher surface and which need more curb riding, where the Red Bull's going to slide behind. And when it's coming down to these fine margins, that's where you're seeing Red Bull having Max having to pull out that extra tenth. When it comes to Mercedes, they obviously didn't find their silver bullet, or the term Toto uses so famously, and their silver bullet, they found it in that front wing. That one front wing has made such a big difference for them. They were constantly trying to change the floor and trying to bring a new floor, and that wasn't working. And then they realized that, oh, it's the front wing that's making the most difference, and we need to bring that. And that's given them a lot of performance, especially at tracks like Silverstone, where you can overtake and you can use a bit of tire and strategy to make it sustain. And then at a track like this, you're seeing McLaren not having the game together. That 4.7 second pit stop for Lando really threw him out of the race. Or you could have seen him get his first home win out here and the second of his career. And he's been on a good run. But I guess when you're Max and Red Bull's opponent, you have to be mistakeless. And they rarely make a mistake. And on the days they do, you have to be ready to jump in and take the chance with both hands, I guess.
Spot on, I guess. Because I, w- every time I saw McLaren, throw away a win, it was probably because of a strategy error, and it was never on pace. It was never a driver error. Even Lando, yes, he could have given a bit more gap and backed out when Max pushed him to the edge, and he could have possibly saved his race. And it's right to say that they've lost maybe a total of 4 to 5 races this season just by not
Yes,
being proactive or
yes,
making strategy errors.
yeah.
Is
And
would that be a fair assessment to say?
yes, and it's very interesting because I asked Lando this on Saturday in post qualifying. I was in that press conference. That's the only one I've done out of the FIA press conferences. But when I asked him this, are you worried about strategy? And his strategy remains one of the weaknesses. We've seen you throw away a win in Canada due to, in a similar way where, like Red Bull jumped you in the pits when it was a track where you were supposed to do well at, or even in Barcelona. And there were mixed. The trouble with this race was the weather kept changing. It was supposed to rain for, I think, heavy showers were expected for a good 1 hour. That didn't happen. And then the teams was thrown into, as the tracks started drying up, everybody had to come up with an alternate strategy. And that's where they won't be able to be proactive. And that's exactly what I'd asked Lando on Saturday. And he's like, no, I'm confident of my strategy. I'm confident that I can jump, I can make a difference and that my team will take the best decision. So Lando's gone in with that confidence, but it's obviously not panned out as expected because he couldn't manage his tires and you saw him losing so much of lap time to Max. It was really easy for Max to pass him. So him and George, I guess, it didn't work out as much. Lewis, he obviously had the experience. He's finished a Silverstone Grand Prix on 3 tires once, with one delaminating out of it, and he's, I mean, he is one of those who could have done it, if not anyone. And I think Clarkson put it right. At a track like this, you bet your money in the old ones, which is Fernando and Lewis. And to be honest, if I'd really have to say who's the
Very
real
true.
one who can give Max a run for his money, the real drivers on the grid who'll still give him a run for the money are Fernando and Lewis. I still bet and that's still my bet on the championship.
Honestly, I wouldn't disagree with you. And if they were given the right car and the right treatment, I'm going to put that as a caveat
Yeah.
that I genuinely think they really run him all the way to the end. But just to stay on this whole McLaren note, right? One thing you now see McLaren do is they're always front run back in the early 2010s. Now that they've
Yes.
fallen off the cliff, and since Idle has come in, now they're rebuilding the
Yes.
team back to winning ways. You can see how they're a changed team, but they're relearning how to start winning again. And you can
Yes.
see
It
that
will
these
take
small
time to bring
errors
in
that
that.
they make,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
it will
It will take time.
exactly.
And
And
we still
what
have
I've
half a
seen
season
them do
left.
is we do, and like you said before, 70 odd points is not a big gap at all. You can recover that with 12 more races to go
And
in the
championships
year, and
have
it's been
been
done
lost
before,
before.
multiple times, in fact.
Yeah, and here's what has happened now.
Exactly.
Mercedes has come into the mix, but they've kind of neutralized it. Yes, they are helping Red Bull a bit by taking a win or two from McLaren, but at the same time, those points are not going to Red Bull either. You're not seeing them be a complete advantage, and the real ones who are losing out on this is probably Ferrari. So Mercedes coming into the mix can even help Red Bull. The real ones like Ferrari's just about hung on to its second place in the constructors, but you don't see that in the drivers. You're seeing a
Trust.
totally different picture coming up. Like Carlos Sainz is only 4 points behind his teammate, so Charles has not had anything good after Monaco, and we've
Exactly.
had a good 4 races since. And you look at it. I mean, when you look at it, like, are these 4 teams? How that is going to play out? I'll say the battle might be Red Bull and McLaren, but you'll have Ferrari and Mercedes. The way Mercedes is kind of helping Red Bull by taking a win from McLaren. Tomorrow might be the other way around, where Mercedes and Ferrari end up being the factors that kind of don't help Red Bull and help McLaren. That can work both ways. They can end up helping McLaren tomorrow and maybe in the second
True.
half of the seasons. So because Singapore is a track where Ferrari is going to be very, very strong. There's certain tracks with
Very
certain
strong.
track
Yep.
layouts and characteristics where you can expect Ferrari and Mercedes to be stronger and to be really close to Red Bull. And right now, if you look at the qualifying is getting closer and closer. So driver error, a little bit of a lock up here and there at any of the corners is costing a driver about 3 to 4 places on the grid. And that's how tight the front and the midfield have become. And given that, yes, we do have a championship on our hands. You never know. You have a Haas coming out of nowhere. Their upgrades, they bring one and it works. Look at them, P5 and P6 for 2 weekends in a row. They almost, I wouldn't be surprised if Hülkenberg gets his podium with a Haas instead of waiting for it with an Audi.
Actually, what this is a good book to segue into whatever is happening apart from the top three positions. Because I think what we're seeing now is we've got, at least in terms of the constructors, not drivers,
Yeah.
we've got a definitive top three, if not a definitive winner. So let's set aside McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes, because those three guys are doing a fantastic job. Now let's please come down to Ferrari, because I want to know what on earth is happening at Ferrari. Why is it that once they hit their peak in a season, like Monaco, there's no after that, they just say goodbye. We'll see you next season, and then disappear. And the best part is Charles Leclerc is supposed to be a golden child, is not getting the treatment he needs or he deserves. The guy these guys are banking on for the future. And why the Carlos Sainz is always in the right place at the right time. Now, I'm not going to say that it's because there's a favor from one person to the other. That's not the case. It's just a string of bad strategy calls, string of bad luck, everything hitting them at once.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Look at Ferrari's championships for the last 16 years. This time of the year is the time Ferrari start being Ferrari, which is making a lot of errors, doing a lot of mistakes. It all starts slipping away. And this is about that time of the year when Ferrari tend to start losing it. And I think with Vasir in charge, you are not going to see that happen very often. I think where they've underestimated their rivals is that they were just going to have Red Bull to beat and not a McLaren and a Mercedes and things like that. And I don't think they were bringing the upgrades they brought. Charles was a bit. Charles used to not reveal much, but Carlos was very optimistic and realistic that we've bought here only a tenth or two worth of an upgrade. Whereas when McLaren had a better rate of development, if you compare McLaren and Ferrari, when they came into I think Miami or Imola, McLaren got a couple of tenths with them. Their upgrade was worth, say, roughly 3 to 4 tenths. And you've seen that transpire all along. And McLaren's upgrades have been really working, whereas Ferraris have been minor updates. And normally they have this trend where they save it for, say, later in the season, like a Monza, which is a home track. They have to look good in front of their investors. That's where the Tifosi are. So, and then there'll be upgrades. And you have a long season. I mean, 12 more races coming in. You can expect something in Hungary and Belgium from Ferrari. They normally are known to do something around that time or bring an upgrade there. But when you look at it, I think Ferrari, their biggest loss this weekend is the whole Enrique Cardile, the chassis guy of theirs, who has left the team. And that's been a shocking announcement because when I came in on Thursday, there was chatter about possibly Lawrence Stroll poaching him. And we've also heard Adrian's link with that team. So when we asked Fred Vassier on Sunday after the race, that are you sure? Can you clarify whether Enrique's Cardile is going to stay with you? And he was like, yes, of course he's going to stay. He's not going anywhere. Last time I checked, he's pretty much with us. He's at the company. And the next morning you have this, and then there's Vassir who's going to overlook the chassis division, which is really odd, because obviously they clearly didn't expect it, or they weren't really taking that seriously that he was being poached by Aston Martin. Which brings me to the second point, which is losing a big guy like that, a big chassis guy like that to Aston is a huge blow for Ferrari, unless they have a replacement, unless their Newey is going there. But then the Newey bit is such that this might be speculation, but we've heard that he was at the Silverstone Grand Prix, and I was told he's staying at the Hilton on track, and that he might have been given a tour of the old Force India or the now Aston Martin facility, in Silverstone, and he might have had a tour to go and see things around their engine and their their whole state of the art facility there. Even we guys were given a tour on I think Thursday or Friday, and we got to see the whole Aston Martin factory and things like that. But yeah, we weren't allowed to take pictures because our cameras were stickered or whatever. But we were taken, and it's quite impressive. From I've last been there when it was Force India, and I'd seen it go from Jordan to Force India, and now I'm seeing it go from Force India to Aston Martin. So the old building has been redone and things like that. So yeah, if you have Newey and you have Carlisle going to Aston Martin, that's one hell of a team forming there. And if you have Carlisle going there and Newey going to Ferrari, then yes, they have a bit of balance, and 25 and 6 look good. But losing someone like this without a backup is going to be very damaging for Ferrari, unless Frederic Garcia has someone, or unless Ferrari have a backup plan and have somebody else ready for the chassis,
To
to
be
take up the chassis side of things.
honest, what you just told me, we have so much to unpack in that, and every little movement that happens within teams is obviously it's contributing to their individual team visions. For instance, Aston Martin, they're heavily investing into the team. At least Lawrence Stroll, he probably wasn't happy with the development, the performances. So he thinks pumping in more money and more important people into the team is going to revamp, get them a better position for 25. And then you've got a whole new situation. Where it's going still speculative. We still don't know where where he's heading towards. But either way, Red Bull has now lost a huge part of their success. And somebody else standing to gain something there. So basically, what's happening is all these key personnel movements, you're going to see a kind of revamped one step higher grid across the entire. So it's
Yeah.
going to be like it's going to be Red Bull on top, and then second, and then third. You're looking at more or less a level field.
Yeah, that's what happens when you have a
Go
new
on, go on. No worries.
regulations coming in, say a year or two down the line. So you have this whole technical personnel shuffle, or you have team principals going from here to there. And I think as far as Aston Martin goes, that also could mean that Dan Fallows might be moving, because there have been ramblings in the paddock about maybe possibly him leaving the team. Dan Fallows is someone, he's ex Red Bull, who was sent there.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
they had poached an ex Red Bull chassis guy for their job. So I don't know how that is going to come about, but there's definitely a lot of shuffling, and Aston Martin is definitely poaching, trying their best to get the right pool of people together to get everything working, because they've gone and invested a lot of money. And if you look at it from Lawrence Stroll's perspective, it does make sense. He's put all the right things in the right place and given them everything. And if they can't come up with a car that helps them fight titles, it's really difficult. And you have Fernando there. Fernando's a good driver. You can't have him on the podium. Basically, this season, Aston is far from where they used to be, say, last season. Last season, they were almost second in the championship at the beginning of the year. They slid down to, say, worst come worst, fourth. Right now, they're fifth in the championship. They're fighting RBs and Hasses. And say Alpine is nowhere. Yes, they have improved a bit, but Aston needs to be fighting in that mix with, say, a McLaren, a Ferrari, a Mercedes. And that's clearly does not seem to be happening this time around. So, yes, that's where all these signings are coming in, so that
Absolutely.
they're in a better place in 25 and 26 and so on and so forth.
You brought up a good point now. I had completely missed out or forgotten about the fact that we also have a works team that we haven't yet discussed about, which is Alpine. Um, what on earth is happening at Alpine? Because we were just talking right before this podcast, and you had mentioned something about Flavio Briatore making some key moves, or at least trying to influence something happening within Alpine. Do you mind
Yes.
just running us through what exactly you've heard?
So he's been brought like some super consultant in the consultant's capacity or advisor's capacity to make key changes at Alpine. Now, one of the changes he's making is he's got rid of the Renault engines. I mean, it's an open secret of the paddock that the Renault engines won't be there anymore. So Viry Chatillon, where Renault has its engines division, won't be used anymore and probably close down, and they're going to become a customer team to Mercedes. So if Alpine become a customer team to Mercedes, they're possibly in a position of being a privateer team, and they are almost going back to the stage where they were a Lotus before becoming a Renault and then an Alpine. So I think Briatore, the part that's being speculated is that Briatore has potentially been brought in to say put that team in a better position to be sold possibly to a decent buyer who's ready to invest and give it a new identity, because the whole Renault Works team bit, the whole Renault Works team project seems to have failed, and there's not much they can do about it. And at the moment, the driver market bit, which you can segue into further, is that Carlos Sainz is also being considered there. And if Carlos were not to answer, then there'll be probably Duhan will go in there. But that's how it's impacting the driver market. And yes, Alpine to Mercedes engines makes sense. But if I were Carlos Sainz, okay, Aston Martin in 26 will be out of the picture. They'll have their own Honda engines, but you're still third in line. That means Mercedes will priority will be its factory team. They will give engines there first. Second in line will be Williams, then McLaren, and then Alpine. So that puts them fourth, basically. You're fourth in line to get a Mercedes engine. So that may puts you. It doesn't put you in the best place. But yes, if Mercedes engines are really, really good in 25 and 26, it could benefit them. But the whole identity of the team changing and what it's good, where this goes in the future is going to be really interesting to watch. Because that's where a man like Flavio is going to try and make the best of whatever commissions or whatever he has to make, where he's going to transform that team and probably instrument one of these big deals, something he's been known for. Even the kind of in the capacity he's worked with Formula One, for that matter. So yeah, that's what we see happening with Alpine.
I think this is a segue, honestly, to what's been the talk of the season this year, in a way. It's the driver market, right? And you're absolutely right about Flavio Briatore doing his Flavio Briatore things to make something happen. Let's talk about Carlos Sainz for a second. Now, this is a guy that's had, let's put it decent. Like, he's had decent performances in that Ferrari, in the situation the team in, the situation that he's in within the team. He's had some
Yes.
decent performances. One podium finish and top 5 finishes in the last 3 races. It's fine. Considering where his team finished, he's doing fine. But why is it that it's taking him so long, or it's taking teams so long to sign a driver like him? Why is sleeping on Carlos Sainz?
If you look at Carlos' situation, every team has given him an offer that they can offer him. You've had him. He is a three-time Grand Prix winner. He is not a world champion. Let's go get into that. He's a three-time Grand Prix winner. He's also going to turn 30 next year, this year or next year, if I'm not wrong. And you also have, he's also going to be somewhere in that mid-age category of the Formula One driver grid, if you look at it. And then you have to look at the future where he wants a multi-year deal, whereas the deals Mercedes and Red Bull were obviously his first choice. If Mercedes take him on, it'll be for a year and no more. He'll get a 1 year contract. The multi-year does not come in the form of a Red Bull or Mercedes. And Red Bull clearly don't want him till Verstappen is there. And Helmut has put that on record, I think, to some of the publications, that Carlos is surely out of the picture there. Now, but then when he's looking at Mercedes, the realistic options are Williams, Merck, or Alpine. Now, what happened in Austria is Williams was supposed to make that announcement. Netflix were also there to shoot this whole thing, that he's being announced as a Williams driver, and they were ready to give him that multi-year deal that he wants. And Vowles had obviously convinced him of that. But then you have Briatore arriving on the scene, and all of a sudden Briatore is wooing Carlos. So then he now has a third option apart from, say, Williams and Mercedes. And Mercedes, if he gets, I think Toto has also mentioned that Carlos is still someone they could consider. But you also have, like, the whole driver market is now, Audi has gone out of the picture. If you look at Audi, they got fed up of waiting. They basically, people are getting fed up of waiting for Sainz because it's, yes, he's a free agent and a strong contender and a hot property on the market, a good driver, but it's not a world champion. It's not like you're taking a 3-time world champion into your team. They can't afford to keep waiting. And I think the Williams deadline was sometime Tuesday this week. Audi's deadline is long past, I'm told. So that's out. And then you have Alpine and you have Mercedes left. So I don't know how that is going to come about, because whatever Carlos does, he's going to have to do it quickly now. And because Red Bull is clearly not happening for him. And you had Eddie Jordan and David Coulthard joke about it the other day, that why not just think of considering timeout and probably wait for Lewis to retire or end his time at Ferrari and then go back in. I think that's just a suggestion. I don't think that's the right thing to do. If I were Carlos, either take up that 1 year in Mercedes, get some podiums, then wait it out, see how the situation is in 26, and then go for it. Because I think George's contract is over by 26. Williams has Alex's contract ending by then. So why not just, wait it out for a year or two, or a year or two, and in the meanwhile, you're still with a successful team, pitched against a driver like George. Why not do that? And Antonelli is obviously waiting in the wings, but they can develop him alongside. I mean, they can. There's already talk about Sargent possibly being replaced by the mid-season, and Vowles has also said that on the Friday in the press conference, that we're potentially looking at options even for this season and next season. So maybe Antonelli goes there, and you have Carlos can do a Mercedes move to Mercedes for next year. But Carlos will have to make his mind up really soon, because the smaller teams don't want to wait any longer. Mercedes might. So Toto had a very cryptic statement that there's one team with too many options, like Red Bull maybe, and there's one driver with too many options, and that's kind of been the cock in the entire driver market. So yeah, that's been the Carlos's situation.
I think there's not much to really add on Carlos' situation because it's now, I think the ball's in his court a bit. He's given
Yes,
the best offer he possibly can, and he needs to make up a decision on
yes,
his end to revert back to whatever, which team is giving him anything. And
yes.
would it be fair from his side to ask for a multi-year deal, knowing that you're not exactly yet a hot cake, but there is going to be somebody who's going to be hot cake maybe 6 months or 1 year
Yes,
down the
it is
line?
a bit of a coin toss, but then you are in a position where you now have to toss that coin. You've had 6 months to do the thinking, the negotiating, the talking, and now you have to see what works out for you best and toss that coin. It's simple. Now it's like if he doesn't end up taking a call in the next two, he might be just get left out in that musical chairs of Formula One, and we've seen that happen to drivers before, where they've had options, sat around, and just let it all go out of control. And yeah, then there are other teams also like Red Bull. Yes, they, even Sergio Perez is in a bit of trouble. And you have that matter also that you can segue into, which is the other driver market story. But it's
Let's
you have a driver from Red Bull
let's
camp.
let's do that. I think
Yeah, yeah. So with Sergio,
let's
obviously,
really segue into this Sergio
yeah, so
Perez
we have to
situation.
segue into the Red Bull story. That is the big
Now, I
driver
just
market story, where they could have a serious internal shuffle. Now, Liam
exactly.
Lawson is filming. They have filming day today where the RB20 will be done. I think that's, sorry, on Thursday. And that's a closed test which is happening, or a closed filming day where Liam will take over the RB20. And we're not sure whether they're going to evaluate him, because Christian was like, they aren't, they might not be. And secondly, even if they evaluate him, that'll be good enough to make him a RB driver. Maybe not a Red Bull one, because I don't think they want to pitch him against a Max in his very first first opportunity. That brings us to the fact that Sergio has been thoroughly underperforming. Max can't carry on driving like he is on the limit, and Christian has been very open that yes, now it's no excuse. It's you know it's crystal clear that he needs to step up in the next two races, or we're going to have a long summer break of discussions. Now, the name that's being associated with that is Daniel Ricciardo. How Ricciardo came into the picture is because I think Christian is very, very happy with his upward trajectory in the last three races where he showed consistency. Then in Silverstone, we had his car breaking down right before it went onto the grid, and he's had to put in a lot of old parts onto the car because RBF just bought an upgrade, which didn't work basically. Although he was able to get 1 point in the last race, there's something like their performance really swings right to left, and yeah, so his performance, him getting that mojo back and being able to sustain it over 3 races, has impressed Horner, and Horner knows he has it. He's not going to be as bad as Checo. He'll be better than a Checo, but the question mark with Ricardo is how good he'll be, say, against a Max. So the ones who are likely to be pitched against Max may be Daniel or Yuki. From what I'm hearing, and this is a speculation that has been going around. Daniel might have that in his contract where he has, I mean, the first in line for that opportunity if Checo were to be axed mid-season is him. He might have a clause, something like that I'm being told, obviously by and the journalists and other sources in the paddock. And the other part is that Daniel comes into the picture because if you look at the car, the Red Bull, he and Max need the same things from the car. The driving styles are diverse, but not, he doesn't have the same problem as he has with Tsunoda, where they are completely different driving styles. And Checo and Max have that, where they need different things from the car. And in the past, it was easier to probably design a car around a Ricardo and a Max together because they need that pointy end. And that is what they're able to do. They're able to get maximize that, and that's why his Red Bull test in Silverstone last year was really good, enough to put him on the second row alongside Max. And the delta to Max in that car, when he'd not driven for 8 months, was just 2 tenths to Max Verstappen. That's what got him this drive. And the other part with Liam, we've also seen Liam. Um, a lot of people saw him going from the back door to Audi to Sauber to negotiate that, but then the Audi bit is being blocked by Carlos. And if there's an opportunity here to replace Ricardo if he's moving up, then obviously that'll happen. But I think the only way Liam will be replacing Ricardo is if Ricardo is getting that promotion, and that depends on the next 2 races. Will Yuki get a chance? Yes, if that mid-season switch happens, Daniel into the Red Bull this year, then he gets a half a year. And if that doesn't still work, then yes, Yuki has a chance for 25. So there are those multitude of options that Red Bull can afford to put in. But the part that they're reluctant with Liam and Yuki are possibly that they don't want to put them against a Max. They fear the part, or they're a bit reluctant about Max and highlighting them. And when it comes to Daniel's dealt with the Max
Yes.
before, and you never know. Going into a car like that might just give him more confidence, or then psychological boost is worth a good 2 to 3 tenths on track. So yeah,
Exactly.
it might work. But as far as Sergio
For
goes,
sure.
it's
I
definitely a
think
mental
that's a
downward.
good move.
Yeah. So it's very interesting what will happen at Red Bull.
So there's 2 points here.
Yes.
But there's 2 points here that I really want to discuss. One is obviously the Sergio Perez bit, which is that number one, clearly very early in announcing his contract extension. The fact that they've signed on for a 1+1. Um, if you were Red Bull, or why would Red Bull do something like that? Because we all knew from the outside, and we weren't even within the team to know that Sergio Perez is clearly on a downward spiral. Red Bull probably knew it, but they were in thorough denial. But now that he's proved it right after his contract signing, why he needs to be out, don't you think
I
for a
think
team like Red Bull that's so calculative in its approach, they
I'm
made a
not very
mistake?
sure. I'm not very sure, but that could have been a move to block Sainz because Carlos was after that drive, and
Where's where's
that
the
could have been
logic
a way
there?
to because I think Carlos was the one who wanted to be there, and the whole Carlos lobby
Right.
that kept whether it was journalists or whoever, there was a whole lobby marketing Carlos into that picture. Whereas I think with Carlos they didn't have that faith, but when it comes to Sergio, I think they knew that they have a lot of options within their pool of talent, and that's what they want to work on, and that's one they want to develop, and that's one they want to see there. And probably if they had a clause with Daniel, then it makes no sense taking a Carlos into the picture because then you already have this in writing with this driver. So basically, even last time when there was this whole, oh, Daniel's going to be replaced by after the triple header and after summer break, Red Bull were like, no, he has all the time in the world to prove, get his consistent form back, because he was being given that RB drive. The reason they put him in that team is for him to build him back up and for him to build himself up again and gets consistent. Now that car's performance being inconsistent, sometimes puts in a bit of performance swings for him. But if you look at it on paper, he's close to Yuki. It's not like Max and Checo. And with those two options, even Yuki is doing very well. Even if they want Yuki up there, then it makes sense. Keep Checo going and have those performance clauses thrown into his contract where you can switch it around. And that's potentially, it's actually very interesting that they've done that. And maybe some, like the Dutch journalists are saying, probably the Verstappen family, Max wanted Checo, so that could have been the case. But now Christian has openly admitted that obviously it's clear as crystal that this is currently not working, and we probably gave him a contract thinking the contract will ease him out, the pressure will go off, and that he would perform better. But that hasn't worked out. So maybe giving a contract was a way of kind of, getting that off his chest, because they have a championship to fight, and the contract thing shouldn't pressure him, and but actually I think it's the other way around. As soon as you see that Red Bull this time of the year, every year, when the season goes to Europe, we've seen Checo trail off. The faster that Red Bull gets, the slower the bigger the gap between Checo and Max gets. Apart from these Singapore or these other tracks where you'll see Checo maybe come back, Baku, Singapore, you aren't going to see much. I mean, that's because they themselves are on the back foot. And that's why you're seeing Max pull out those 2 to 3 tenths, and Checo's unable to do that because he has to change around setups, do a lot, and it's still not coming together. And one feels bad for him because that's really the price you pay for being Verstappen's teammate. It's not easy. Whole team needs to, his rival teams are scratching their heads how to beat them, so imagine your own teammate. So yeah,
The
I feel for
inside.
Checo because
Yeah.
he's an amazing guy and I've known him since Force India. So yeah, but then he also has his limitations, and you can't put unrealistic expectations from him, which I think Red Bull are realizing now. So that's their
Absolutely.
driver
I think the
situation.
second point,
It's very interesting.
the second
It's
point,
very, very interesting.
it
And
is.
yeah, and the worst part is Christian and Daniel and Max and Daniel's manager Blake were seen walking out of the track after qualifying. They can do that, but why parade around in public? So that was another hint given off. And then the Japanese media tried asking Christian, why not Yuki? Why is Yuki not being given a test? Why is Liam given a test in the Red Bull? So they said, because we know how Yuki is there, and Yuki's obviously there. And then all of a sudden, Christian brought the Daniel topic up. Even Yuki's admitted how good influence, how much Daniel has been helping him there. So nobody had said Daniel as a word in the questions asked to Christian, and Christian brought it up himself. So that's where we tried to put 1 + 1 2, and we're like, maybe Ricardo's really a serious front runner for that drive, and maybe there's more to it than meets the eye, and we could see something drastic happening either midway
Just a
this season
bit.
or maybe in next year.
But that's my second part of the question. See, you right, wherein one, Red Bull doesn't want to play young drivers against a Max Verstappen because you don't want to be shooting yourself in the foot. You're known for developing drivers in a way that no other team has before, and you don't want to be killing that talent as soon as you put them against a Max Verstappen. So
Yes,
it's obvious that a choice like Daniel Ricciardo would be able to do the job, get the job done, right? But even in the
yes,
case of Daniel,
definitely.
are they looking at Daniel as a seat warmer until they get somebody that's a bit more experienced, maybe in 26 when the regs change?
You never know. Obviously, they see potential in Daniel. They've already done that RB19 test with him. Plus, he's had a season on. The trouble with him in the RB car, they've obviously felt, is when the setup can't be optimized, he tends to trail off. But the trailing off is not like 2.5 seconds or three. It's a few tenths from Yuki in qualifying, which sadly in the midfield is 4 or 5 places. In race pace, they're able to keep up with each other, with the caveat being this race, where I think he came out saying like there must have been a hole in my car where I was so slow because they changed all the parts on his car before. So yeah, there was obviously something wrong then. But on normal days, they have that GPS data there. They know where he can do it. But his highs that he's got is a P5, a P4. in last year in Mexico, a P5 in Miami at the sprint, and then obviously he had a P5 in Canada. So these highs that he has are definitely something they're banking on. And if they can give him that ride car, which they do have, they know what suits him and what he's looking for and why he's uncomfortable in that RB. If anyone knows it, I think Red Bull know it better than us. We just see it, evolving very ridiculously on paper. But when you look at it in the form of results, we have a different picture to it, and the team has a different picture. So surely they must be relying on that kind of understanding that we have the car we can give him to do equal Max or even do better than him when Max is on a back foot. But at least the whole load doesn't fall on Max to a large extent. And yes, you do need a second driver. You have Max Verstappen against two Ferrari boys, two in McLaren and two in Mercedes, out of those six drivers, one is a world champion. Lando wants to be a world champion and is pretty much in the race for the title this year. Obviously, the constructors is at threat. In the constructors, look at the points gap. It's not much.
Sorry, I couldn't
Yeah,
unmute, but yeah, bang on, bang
yeah.
on. One thing that I think we have not really touched on, but it happened, I'm sure, sometime in the last 3 weeks, is Ollie Bearman being announced as a Haas driver for next season.
Yes.
What are your
And
thoughts on that?
Esteban Ocon might be announced as his teammate. That announcement might happen anytime now. That's what I'm hearing.
So Esteban to Haas, is that what the street saying?
Yes. Yes, that was the
Wow,
story we were
okay.
hearing that Esteban will go to Haas. Ollie Bearman being signed in, I'm happy for the fact that he's been signed in, but he got signed and look at his F2 race. I think, rookies F2 to F1 is a massive jump. It didn't show at a track like Jeddah, which is a mixed bag, but it does show on more conventional circuits when F1 comes to, say, a Barcelona, a Silverstone. And it's too much of a jump because this ground effect technology, the cars that are there, they are not as easy as the F2 cars. And there's too much of a difference now between an F1 car and F2 car. So you have to give them a lot of running to get them to speed with how to optimize the best in that car. So in a way it's good he goes to Haas, but I hope that doesn't mean Kevin is being axed. Kevin, obviously, we don't know what Kevin's plans are, whether he wants to continue or not. But I think if Kevin decides to retire, this will be his final stint out of Formula One. And that's if Esteban gets hired. The weirdest story I've heard this weekend, which we're not very sure of, there was one or two reports that came out, I think, in the European press, which said Esteban might replace Sargent and Williams this year, which is
What?
really weird. Yeah, because that would
Esteban?
mean if Esteban goes to Williams mid-season, Doohan gets a drive mid-season, and then what about Haas? So it's a bit confusing. The driving market's very, very interesting because of all these. Briatore just came in and threw in a whole mix of different things. So yeah, it's complicating.
Feel like this is a bit like 4D chess that we're seeing here, but except it's
Yeah,
all so politically puppeteered that you really
yeah.
don't know what's true, what's not true. There's lobbies, there's driver lobbies that we've talked about in our very first episode. Push
Yes, and
from the
obviously I
media,
told
push
you even
from
then. Yeah.
yeah,
I had even
yeah,
told you then it's
exactly.
going
So
to be a very, very interesting season. It's going to be interesting. If it's not interesting on track, it's going to be exciting off track. And if it's not exciting off
off
track, it's
track.
going to be really saucy on track. Like you saw the Max and Lando clash. Now, that's another story we can
Oh
talk of,
yes.
where Max and Lando clash on
Oh my
track.
god.
That's really funny how the British press, and I mean anybody apart from the neutral press who's non-Brit, did not attack Max with it, because we all knew that Max and Lando are very close. They're going to sort it out and they're going to come back. But Lando made the mistake in the TV pen in Austria. He was standing next to Max, and he made the mistake of saying, if he wants friendship, then he'll have to come with an apology, and otherwise I'll lose respect. So he kind of gaslit the British media, and then they crusaded in his name from Monday to Friday. And then Thursday, when he comes back to the paddock, they are all disappointed that Lando's being too soft, and then Max has shown an emotional side. So the Dutch feel Max has let away his soft side, where he's. But I think it's really big of Max. Like Max was very matured at that point. He said, "I will handle this off track. Priority is to talk to him, and I don't want to judge this, but let me come out saying, let me see what has happened, watch the onboards, and then let's pass a judgment. But I don't want to blame it on anyone at the moment." And obviously, if there's 5% blame, it would be on Max. But if you look at it, every driver on Thursday came defending Lando. I mean, defending Max. Everyone said it's a racing incident. There's just too much being made out of it, and you people are blowing it out of proportion. So that picture I posted on Instagram with Max being, a massive scrum around Max. I think I had the first question, and I asked him, "Is it blown out of proportion?" And what do you think? Moving forward, do you think you've reached an understanding with Lando? So he's like, "Yeah, we watched the onboards together, both of us." Lando reached out to me on Sunday. I called him. The first thing was getting this off my chest. And he said, "For me, my friendship with Lando is above all," which is a huge thing for Max to say. And one of the sides of him that we've seen before, for Max Verstappen, loyalty means everything. Lando's first win, Max was. It's the only time I've seen Max not unhappy about a P2. He was super happy about it. He's been always encouraging. So I think that's a really different side of Max we're getting to see, where he's going in sorting it out. And then he was asked, is it going to be the same with this driver? Or is it the same with other drivers, or just Lando? He said, "Obviously, I'm closer to Lando. So it will be different with one driver and different with the others." So he's pretty clear he's quite loyal to Lando, and he values that friendship. And he went and told Lando that, "I just want you to know, if you're side by side with you, I'm not going to hit you." And that's where a lot of others said it's not like he sent them at 54 Gs into cops, and it was not like cops 21 and things like that. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's
it
true.
was really nice, and both of them came rubbishing it, but the British media, or the media at large, did not like it because, hey, then don't go crusading in their names. They're just drivers. They're going to sort it amongst themselves and come back, and they're going to be best friends again. And you're the ones who are going to be screaming, ranting, and not being upset about things you shouldn't have made a fuss about in the first place. So yeah,
I know we've jumped from off track to back on track again, but I just want to give my 2 cents on what was very surprising to me. Not surprising, but in a way, it kind of reinforced what we've talked about before, but also surprising in a
yeah,
certain extent. One is after the clash, and for me, I think it's a racing incident. I don't know why Max was given that penalty,
yeah,
but let's leave it at that, right? There's so many opinions around it right now. But off track, one is I was so surprised to see the way Max handled that penalty. One, the second is his mature reaction towards that, from that
yes.
whole incident, the way he came out
He
in the
did
press.
not let the
He
media get
wasn't
a
cooking it,
chance to quote or
not a
misquote
bit.
him. Yeah.
Exactly. He was so clear. He, unlike Lando, actually, I think he's learned the whole media game, how to be very neutral and respond
Yes.
and handle the entire thing very maturely, which I'm very
Yeah.
happy about and quite impressed. And the second thing is, we talked about this in the first episode where you talked about the British media and the bias that they have towards certain drivers. I
Yes.
have never seen it so crystal clear like this
Yes,
Silverstone
because this
GP.
is where their love
It was so
relationship, or
obvious.
their whole love affair with Max Verstappen, and Max is the greatest and a generational talent. It all ended in the last 1 week when they came out saying
Ended.
all just
Yeah,
one incident was enough to send it all in flames. So I mean that's just how it was.
exactly.
But you didn't have to crusade. I mean what you had to do was really understand that this is Lando, and then obviously then trying to orchestrate something between them is even more stupid, because this generation, I feel,
Exactly.
you look at Charles, Max, George, they all like racing each other. And they all came out in support of the
Exactly.
fact that these two just had a racing incident. And both Lando and Max watched the
Exactly the
onboards
point.
together and come to the same conclusion that we were driving stupidly. And it's a 50-50. So if then when you're the media, you're going trying to instrument this, but this generation might not be, they might set a new example, which is the second question I'd ask Max is, Are you planning to, do you want to set a more different example than, say, the Rosberg and Hamilton, who are also friends and became fierce rivals, or Senna and Prost, and so on and so forth, where you become ruthless and there's no end to it on track? So he's like, no, my friendship with Lando is above everything. And then obviously we raced hard, but that is how it is. And we all know that there can be issues, but I had to give that assurance to Lando that with me alongside, this wasn't going to happen. So I think he has it sorted with Charles, Lando, and yeah, possibly George in the future. But I don't think this generation of drivers, we're going to see toxic rivalries. And, honestly, those toxic rivalries, as much as a fan base enjoys it, look how toxic the Formula One fan base has become today as a result of it.
It's
Is it good for
ridiculous.
the sport,
And the
bad
worst
for the
part is the
sport?
media
And if
is
you
in
have
on it.
two drivers, exactly. And if you have two drivers who want to come out and set a different example, where they want to be fiercest of rivals on track and best friends off track, like Lauda and Hunt had it, they were fierce rivals on track, but they really got along well. What about Lewis and Seb? They clashed in Baku and became the best of friends at the end of it. But maybe Max and Lando, that's the same thing they expect. And I mean, Lando and Max are two people. You see them sharing flights out of here. They were supposed to do King's Day together when Lando broke his nose. And there are things like that. You'll always see them holidaying together or meeting off track or in Monaco, breaking trophies and then whatever, and so on and so forth. So you see that happening between those two. They enjoy their but we know when people like Brundle and everyone come say that no, but this doesn't work when you want to battle it out on track. Maybe it does for them. Maybe that's the only place they want to battle it out with each other. And maybe they're used to it because they do sim racing together. There's so many things they do. And yeah, I think trying to instrument, maybe those days of toxic rivalries are gone, because if when those toxic rivalries happen, it's very hard on the teams. It's very hard in the sport because there's all kinds of controversy flying around, and often there's these below the belt blows given from party to party, and that doesn't make it any interesting. Here you're keeping it interesting on track and off track. We're sorting it out and keeping it calm. So I think people have overshot their themselves when it comes to trying to say, oh, two drivers can't get along in the sport and yet race each other fiercely. That is a bit wrong, because you see it in tennis, you see it in squash, you see it in all other sports where you have people battling it out with each other with their best of friends off track or off the field. So I think that is a bit too much.
To quote Seb, they're making a story out of nothing.
Yes, they all have said that. Thursday, they've said that. This is out of nothing. All of them have come out saying that this absolutely are not required.
But let's round it up because we're almost at the 1 hour mark. What are your predictions going forward? I know you're going to be extending a stay all the way to Budapest. It's a
Yes,
fun
I'm in
track.
England at
It's
the
not the
moment.
best of tracks to overtake, but they've got a nice trophy at the end of it,
It is,
and
it is, it
we're
is. It's
inching
good.
closer.
If you're a good
It
driver,
is a
you
fun
know where
track.
to overtake and how to overtake. It's got interesting DRS zones. Budapest is one of those tracks with long swooping corners. It has a very interesting. It's a very interesting layout. It's one of those best tracks out there. Hungaroring is lovely, and yeah, I think this is where the drivers like Lewis, maybe Max. This track suits many. Max tends to be a bit versatile, like Fernando. They make any track suit themselves. But I think the Hungaroring should be the one that suits Max. Then you obviously have Belgium. Hungary and Belgium are also tracks where Lewis has won 8 races each at each one of them. He's an 8-time winner in both tracks. So you'll expect Lewis to come in with a renewed confidence. Now that
And
Mercedes are up there.
yes, these are
And there are
very
also little
talented
bits and
guys.
bobs going on many other cars. So you might see another mix. You have McLaren coming in with some stuff. You have maybe Ferrari are bringing in something. So yeah, you're gonna have to it's gonna be interesting. And I'm the real battle is gonna be like the real interesting part is Haas is bringing something, an upgrade. So I don't know where they're gonna be. Are they gonna fall behind into the midfield, or whether they're really gonna get closer? And that'll be really interesting if Nico Hulkenberg gets into that mix in the top five. So yeah, I am really excited for Budapest, because I think this is one of the most exciting Grand Prix of the year, and it might not be favoring Red Bull because it's bumpy surface. The track surface is bumpy. unless they have resurfaced parts of the track and put in smoother asphalt. I don't see it working for Red Bull. It also requires a lot of curb riding. A track that requires curb riding is where the Red Bull starts, bottoming out, and then they have to ride their car higher, which makes it a little slower,
Yeah.
and that is problematic. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see whether who else comes in for contention, and we'll have a seventh race winner in that double header. I'm hoping at least at Belgium or Hungary, one of those. That'll be really
Keeping
exciting to
fingers
have
crossed, because
another
I think
winner.
it's been a solid season on track and off track, and I think
Hmm.
hopefully it really keeps getting better and better. They'll keep getting closer
Yeah.
up in the front, and we have something of
Yes.
championship on our hands after a couple of years of Red Bull dominance. Even if it's Max Verstappen winning at the end of
Yes.
the year, I don't really care. It's the whole season's been so good, and so much that you can pick
Yes.
out of it. Even though we're still at the halfway mark, and it could really boom
If
from now
Max
on.
wins this
But the chances are that
championship,
it's not going to.
yeah. If Max wins this championship, I think it's going to be by a very narrow margin. It's not going to be like 80 points or whatever. People are going to close in. And I think the interesting part is going to be like Hungary. I haven't checked up the weather yet, what it is going to be like. It's definitely going to be warmer than here. Warmer than England, because England was an unpredictable forecast at Silverstone. I haven't checked up the weather in Budapest, but the weather will play its part when it comes to tires. And right now, the one factor that even Christian admitted is when the margins are getting, the margins coming down, and it's becoming about five margins. Those fine margins, tires are the main place where the main factor playing in. So if the weather is really, really warm,
Just a
I can
quick
expect nothing
checkup
apart from medium to
on
warm.
the
It'll
weather.
be hard. Yeah.
It's going to be bloody hot. Just from like
Are
a
you
quick
serious? What is it?
glance on AccuWeather, it's bloody hot is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so
Orange
it's going to be
warning for
very interesting how
extremely
that.
high temperature.
Oh yeah, that'll really be interesting then. I'm looking forward to this one. Yeah. So that's
Carry
been
an
that, and
umbrella and plenty of
it's been like
sunscreen
nice
because I know you're going to
debriefing
be
a
there.
triple header for a change. Yeah, it's nice debriefing a triple header for a change. I think sometimes your inconvenience, my inconvenience, has caused a bit of a drama, but we haven't been able to come for the last few races. But I think, yeah, but I think we'll come back for Hungary maybe more
Oh
proactively
yes,
on
yes.
this debrief
I'm waiting for
after Hungary.
Hungary to be a complete thriller, so that we talk solely about Hungary the next time we record.
In Hungary, when the level of temperature soars that high, it's followed by rain. It gets humid and rainy.
Oh man. But then it's going to be a
There's to be at
thriller.
least one shower. Yeah, it's going to be a thriller. And I love it. Like, Hungary always throws up a good race. It's one of those European circuits I love going to. The city is lovely. You have a lot of Indians coming to that Grand
Perfect.
Prix every year because it's the cheapest general admission ticket of
It's
the
cheap.
year. Um, yes, it's cheap. And you have a lot of Indians because it's also the short flight. It's not more than a 5 hour flight to Dubai and a 6 hour to India. So it's Baku and Bombay have the same flying distance as I think Hungary, Budapest, and Bombay. So you have a lot of Indians there at
Oh,
that point of the year. And a lot of them come for the Grand Prix. We had only Ravi
perfect.
Shastri and
So
Kriti
I'm.
Sanan this weekend.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I have so
Yeah,
many
them,
thoughts
yeah.
being thunk at the same time. I'm not able to put them very coherently out there, but it's nice
Yeah,
to see these guys around and have some representation.
yeah.
We're definitely a part of this
Yeah,
world,
now it's
and
getting
it's
more
nice to
often.
see
They're
that
bringing more Indians.
more often.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
it's nice.
Now they're having it
It
more
definitely
often.
is.
Puma India is sending them, and I think Kriti came in with denims, and I think Ravi told me that his steak ambassador Jasul and him were with steak. So yeah, but it's nice to see more and more of India being on the grid, and we had an interesting one in Monaco too. I think last race in Canada and Austria also they've had somebody or the other. So we'll have more in the future.
Fingers crossed. But as for this episode,
Yeah.
let's roll up and we will see you definitely after the Hungarian Grand Prix, because it's no longer a triple header. I think we have a long way to go for the next triple header, which is towards the end of the
Now I
season.
think every Grand Prix is
So
going to throw up something so interesting that we have to debrief it, sadly.
we have to record. Yeah, exactly. We have to record
Yeah.
this. But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll be back with another episode right after the Hungarian Grand Prix. We promise this time we will find a way to do it. But
Yeah.
as ever, please put down your comments, ask us any questions on social media, tag us where you think we need to pick it up and discuss further during the Hungarian Grand Prix episode. But stay tuned in.